Good morning, everyone. I am really excited to bring to you today Senior Agenda Coalition's Gubernatorial Forum. I'm Deb Burton, the Executive Director of RI Elder Info and creator of RIElderinfo.com. And you know that we are dedicated to bringing trusted information to you. And we are really excited to be one of the sponsors today for the Senior Agenda Coalition of Rhode Island's Gubernatorial Forum, where we get to hear the candidates' views on the issues that are going to impact us, our loved ones, and others in our community. Super excited. But I wanted to take a minute and just tell you more about the Senior Agenda Coalition. It's an independent and diverse coalition of agencies and individual members. Their mission, we're getting ready to go live. Sorry about the overhead. Their mission is to mobilize people to achieve power in order to implement an agenda that improves the quality of life of older Rhode Islanders. And they accomplish this through community organizing, public education, and legislative advocacy. And let me tell you, it's an amazing organization. If you want to make sure that your voice gets heard, I really encourage you to join Senior Agenda Coalition. Get in touch with Bernie. It is so important, especially in these times with so many of us aging successfully. We want to make sure that we're able to age independently in a manner that is dignified and respectful. And we're going to need some supports around that as we get older from our elected officials. So I'm really glad the Senior Agenda Coalition was able to bring this to you today. And I hope as this goes on that you hit the like button and the share button, because we need as many voters in Rhode Island educated on these topics as we can possibly get. So hit the like button, hit the share button. Hey, if you want to say good morning, feel free to say good morning in the chat. If you've got comments, you can put them in the chat. If you're watching, if you're hosting a watch party, let us know that too, because it's really interesting to see how many people are watching. So if you're doing a watch party at one of the senior centers, tell us how many people are there with you watching today, because we want to try to reach every single voter here in Rhode Island, because this is incredibly important as we're going forward. And realistically, our next governor is going to be here through a large wave of baby boomers. And then not too far behind that are the Generation X, the generation that nobody talks about. Yeah, Gen X is coming up hot right behind them. And we need to have systems in place that are effective, that are funded, and that are what we need and want as we age. So again, really glad to be partnering with Senior Agenda Coalition today. They are getting the candidates up to the table, and we will be doing live stream with their answers. We've got a crew on site. Thank you very much to DMB Media. And there are so many sponsors that Senior Agenda Coalition has. I'm sure that you will see a graphic recognizing all of them. But this is going to be a really amazing program today.
Morning,
the
everyone.
Auditorium is filling up, and it looks like we're getting ready to go live. So I want you to hit like and share. We are ready to rock. Thank you.
And especially to our gubernatorial.
To get seated. My name is George Neubauer. I'm the board chair of the Senior Agenda Coalition. We are excited to be sponsoring this forum on senior issues, along with 17 other organizations. That would be a Community Together, Alzheimer's Association of Rhode Island, CareLink, Community Partners Network of Rhode Island, Economic Progress Institute, Leading Age Rhode Island, NAACP Providence Branch, Ocean State Center for Independent Living, PACE, Progresso Latino, Rhode Island Assisted Living Association, Rhode Island Elder Info, Rhode Island Healthcare Association, Rhode Island Organizing Project, Rhode Island Senior Senators Director Association, SEIU 1199, and last but not least, the Village Common of Rhode Island. And we are pleased to acknowledge the members of the Rhode Island General Assembly in our audience. If you'd like to stand and be recognized, we'd appreciate that. Any reps in our office? And without question, we are most grateful to our 6 gubernatorial candidates with us today, namely Matthew Brown, Helena Bonanno-Folkes, Nellie Gorbea, our President Secretary of State, Ashley Kalis, Daniel McGee, our President Governor, and Dr. Luis Daniel Munoz. This morning, we will pose several questions for all candidates to address regarding issues impacting seniors' future health care and financial well-being. Okay, we'll also have the opportunity for a summary statement from each candidate at the end of the questioning. We ask you and everyone to listen and take note of how each candidate responds should they be elected our next governor. Each candidate will have no more than 2 minutes to answer. The order which the candidates will respond has been randomly generated numerically for each question. Please understand the tight time frame we faced to honor the candidates' time commitment. Your cooperation is appreciated. Before we start, I want to invite the East Providence Mayor, Bob DeSilva, for his greeting and to thank him for arranging our use of this impressive facility. Major DeSilva.
Thank you. Good morning. It's an honor to welcome all of you here today to the City of East Providence, to this beautiful new high school. By the way, built on time, under budget. It's a great testament. A great testament to a community coming together and working together for the benefit of all of those people in our community and our students. I'd like to thank the Senior Agenda Coalition of Rhode Island for hosting this forum here today. It's an honor to see all of you here. I'd like to take a moment, of course, to welcome our candidates. We have the Honorable Governor Dan McKee, the Honorable Nellie Gorbea, Rhode Island Secretary of State, Matt Brown, Kalulu Kamara, Helena Folkes, Luis Daniel Munoz, and Ashley Kalis. I also want to recognize in the audience, I know we had them stand up, but I'd like to recognize some of our elected leaders who are also here with us today. We have Representative Greg Amori, who was instrumental in seeing this school become a reality. Nice round of applause for him. We have Senator Bridget Valverde, Representative Teresa Tanzi, who I had the pleasure of serving with, and also Representative Deb Ruggiero, who I served with. Representative Terry Cotrevand, Representative Lauren Carson, and former mayor and former assistant superintendent of East Providence Schools, Dr. Isidore Ramos, who's here with us today also. And of course, we have Mr. James Vincent, who, he got to start working on behalf of the people of East Providence when he used to work for City Hall here, and now he's leading the NAACP, so we're very fortunate to have him here today. And last but not least, our superintendent of schools, our new superintendent of schools, Sandra Ferrand, who's sitting back there in the back. Sandra, thank you for everything you do for our students. Without further ado, I'll turn it back over to George. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And lastly, allow me to recognize and acknowledge the Senior Agenda Coalition Board of Directors. If you'd like to stand and be recognized. And in particular, our Executive Director, Bernie Boudreau, for all his outstanding efforts to make this forum a reality. Now we'll start with our first question. It'll be asked by Kelly Arnold, Board Vice Chair of the Rhode Island Healthcare Association, and the order of response will be Ms. Gorbea, Mr. McKee, Ms. Kalis, Ms. Folkes, Dr. Munoz, and Mr. Brown. Kelly.
I'm sorry, who has the timer?
Just watch this gentleman in the hat in the front row.
Oh, yeah, Vinny. Okay, good. Okay, sorry.
Good morning, everyone. Workforce challenges are across the board for all providers of services to Rhode Island's aging and disabled population. Sufficient and sustainable wages that attract, retain health and home care workers will require greater investments by the state. In order for providers of care to meet their current and future staffing needs, there must be a concerted workforce development effort to rebuild the healthcare workforce to be even better than before the pandemic. This effort should include setting a minimum wage of $20 per hour for direct care staff working in Medicaid contracted facilities and agencies. As governor, what other action will you take to help rebuild and sustain a viable workforce for nursing home and home care providers?
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you everybody for being here, and thanks to all of the organizations that put this forum today. The diversity of the people in this room speaks to the importance of this issue. You know, the healthcare workforce crisis is not just in this particular sector, but across the board. And it has to do with the fact that we have, as a society, not valued caregiving. We value income producing of some kind, but in the business community, which is great, but we don't value those people who take care of people. And as governor, to me, what we are pooling our resources for is to invest in people. And so I look forward to, yes, addressing Medicaid reimbursement rates, and that's not just for those who are dealing with the elderly, but across the board. There's a number of other sectors in the healthcare sector that need that rebalancing. And I'm also looking forward to really working on a pipeline in the education sector that really nurtures and grows the people that are going. But in the end, we have to improve working conditions for the sector, otherwise people are not going to want to go into it. And I'm worried about some of the privatization in this sector that's happening, particularly within nursing homes and daycares and stuff, that may or may not be having the kind of effect that we want in terms of community asset, which is to have services in our communities that are taking care of our loved ones. That's really what we should be looking at. How can we best provide choices and options to our elderly and our aging population so that we can take care of them and they can be respected in our community.
Mr. McKee.
Well, thank you first for being here today and talking about an issue very important to our state. Right now, Rhode Island does have momentum like I've never seen before, and that means that we should be able to continue to work with our seniors. I was fortunate to co-chair my long-term health care with Maureen Mayritt for 6 years, and she did a great job, and she's directly connected in terms of making sure that you know, the needs of the seniors are represented in our office. One of the issues in this area is that we've expanded the Wavemaker Fellowship to include healthcare workers. That's a big step in terms of making sure that we're putting those scholarships and those fellowships in a place that we need. One of the things that we did in last year's budget was we put $900,000 plus, close to $1 million annually into home care to allow more home care to happen inside the you know, the residence of the seniors. That's a monies that are repeating themselves each and every year. So that's just not a one-time $968,000, I think it was, but it's every single year. And we also have invested in our nursing homes where there hadn't been a COLA provided to a nursing home for 6 years. Each budget that I've put in has included a COLA, and it allowed more dollars to be put in, and those dollars primarily go to workforce. Every time that the nursing homes receive a COLA, those dollars go into the, you know, into increasing the workforce. And there was legislation that actually increased the workforce in our nursing homes that the General Assembly passed and that we're enforcing as well. So this whole idea of a viable workforce in our nursing homes and home care providers is front and center. And those are just a few of the examples that we're working on. We also intend to continue to invest in our seniors as we did this year in the senior centers, right? The senior centers as well. So we're going to incrementally increase that. I'll talk more about that, but we have a $200,000 increase in our senior centers this year, and next year we'll put another amount in that'll be keep moving us in that direction.
Ms. Kalis.
So I was an OR administrator. I ran operating rooms, high volume, 2,000 to 3,000 procedures a year. We used to recruit CNAs from nursing homes to make them OR assistants because the work was similar. It's backbreaking, it's long hours, and you help people in their most vulnerable moments when they can't move themselves from beds, when you have to go to the bathroom, when you can't dress yourself. And time again, I would hear that the work in our operating rooms was so much easier than the work in nursing homes. So I want to acknowledge that the work that is being done in home care and in nursing homes is hard work. What we need to do is increase Medicaid rates and make it so that reporting requirements on Medicaid don't make it so that organizations restrict staff members, FTEs, to one sort of care versus other payer mixes. That's important, and that'll help get the 700 individuals off of a waiting list from home care. We also need to respect long-term care as a career choice, which means there needs to be a path from home health care aide to CNA to LPN to RN and to nurse practitioner. We need to support that through programs, apprenticeships and training programs. We also need to do things such as suspend the gas tax. That hurt CNAs the most because they're making decisions between going to their patient and taking care of their family. Another thing that we could do is get the state in line with federal reimbursements in terms of tax and transportation. That'll help home health care. Also expanding the classification so that we have a broader workforce where we have home health care aides that are able to participate in care versus just CNAs right now. So we can broaden the workforce by having a new type of care provider for low need care where there isn't a medical intensity that's needed in that area.
Thank you. Ms. Folks.
Yes, I'm so glad we're having this conversation, and thank you all for being here. You know, this has been an incredibly stressful time we've all been through in the last couple of years, and I can't think of any one of us who hasn't been impacted by worrying about our parents, our grandparents, our aunts, our uncles, myself included. And so I'm incredibly grateful to all the people providing care. And we have been fortunate to get ARPA funds to take care of some of the short-term problems, but we have a real crisis around making sure that our healthcare workforce serving seniors is adequately supported. I think it's also an amazing time to think about reinventing senior care, thinking about all the options that are on the table for people. So many people looking forward to ways to aging in home and finding new solutions. And so I look forward to helping lead that as we march forward. The thing that I want to also emphasize is that I absolutely support expanding Medicaid, so we're providing enough funding. But I think we have to do something that we've not done with this last governor, which is hold our nursing homes accountable for making sure that the increases that they're getting in state funding actually go to state workers, and not oftentimes to the private equity owners who own these nursing homes. I talk to too many people in these facilities, and they're feeling the decrease in services, the stress on their care workers, while the pockets of the owners get bigger. So that would be a very big focus of mine, accountability, and making sure that we really get the money in the hands of the people who are providing all this care.
Dr. Munoz.
Thank you. You know, for-profit healthcare greed has been normalized in this country, and we find ourselves confronting all these problems, these shortages of providers, these very low reimbursement rates, and yet we still rely on large hospital systems. We still rely on institutions that ultimately are not really proponents of home-based healthcare. Public health in this country has been dismantled slowly over the last 30 years. Infrastructure as well, in terms of the number of accessible clinics that people can go to, clinics that have more cost controls. And so here we are, post-pandemic, and nothing has really changed in terms of the narrative. Now, I'm a believer that healthcare is a human right, but it should manifest in structure. And so using ARPA dollars, we should be rebuilding our community health infrastructure, which serves our older Rhode Island residents. And as we build that structure, we should really focus on cost controls around certain pharmaceuticals, based on basically the state taking control of its procurement process and extending rebates to all Rhode Islanders to reduce the out-of-pocket cost that older Rhode Islanders are paying, and young. And also, when we think about moving forward, we should really, yes, talk about increasing reimbursement rates for providers, but that doesn't change the overall shortage of providers. We need a state-based medical school that has a 3-year primary care track that creates more dentists, and medical providers, a dental and medical school. We can model it after Quinnipiac University. If we are producing more dentists and physicians from Rhode Island, in Rhode Island, that's how we create the providers necessary to serve all of you. And in addition to that, the Rhode Island Promise Program and all these retraining programs that we have, yes, we need to increase the pipeline, but Bob Scapini in Central Falls High School, where I graduated, was working for 5 years to create a CNA program for high school students, not so that they could choose that as their permanent career, but so that they can come out and at least do some good work in healthcare, and no one helped Mr. Scapini at the state level. It's important for us to recognize that there has to be a will when there's resource, and there's resource. As governor, I will.
All right, how about that? Governor McKee said that he hasn't seen momentum like this in our state before. I think that would be news to most seniors across the state. Poverty rates for seniors in Rhode Island have gone up 5% over the last 10 years. 87% of our nursing homes are at risk of closing, according to a recent report, and we have a severe staffing shortage of direct care workers. So what do? Yes, I would support raising the minimum wage for direct care workers working in Medicaid contracted facilities to $20 an hour. They are struggling to do their jobs because they're struggling to make ends meet for themselves. They're working extra jobs, second, third jobs, driving ride shares, or working in retail. We can't have that for our direct care workers. They need to be able to focus on the care they're providing. I would also raise the minimum wage across all industries to $19 an hour. And that would increase the numbers of care workers in our state. It would also attract care workers from Massachusetts and Connecticut into Rhode Island. We also have to understand what the major underlying driving cause of the current staffing shortage crisis is. And that is the fact that the people in power drastically, by hundreds of millions of dollars, cut Medicaid funding in this state in recent years. And that caused a crisis for our nursing homes, it caused a crisis for healthcare, and it caused a crisis in the staffing shortage that we're seeing now. This was very predictable. Many of us predicted it. Many of us warned that those cuts would lead to exactly these crises that we're facing now. It will be a top priority of mine as governor to restore the Medicaid funds that were cut, expand them, and increase Medicaid reimbursement rates. Thank you.
Next question will be asked by Jim Nyberg, Executive Director of Leading Age Rhode Island. And the order of response would be Dr. Munoz, Mr. Brown, Ms. Kalis, Mr. McKee, Ms. Vokes, Ms. Corbett.
Good morning. Greater investments in both home and community-based and nursing home care are needed to address the service demands of Rhode Island's increasing 75 and older and disabled population. A third to half will need a combination of long-term support services. Most seniors prefer to receive care at home or in a community setting rather than in a nursing home. Lower than the national average, only about 30% of Rhode Island's spending on long-term services and supports for seniors and people with disabilities, excluding those with intellectual and developmental disabilities, is spent on home and community-based care. So the question is, as governor, what is your plan for Medicaid rebalancing and expansion to both improve home and community-based care opportunities while also ensuring the financial viability of the nursing homes?
Dr. Munoz.
Thank you for the question. When you look at CMS and its standards, a lot of the community home-based care services are pretty much left up to the states in terms of being optional. And this is where community health infrastructure comes in. How do we create the comprehensive community health necessary for people to manage their chronic diseases, have access to providers locally, but also then extend, yes, pipeline programs to increase the number of providers that can support them at home for their activities of daily living, and then do so really with a supplemental wage program. I didn't answer the last question entirely, but the truth is $20 is not a livable wage. We need to really have a targeted approach around supplementing wages for these areas of these essential areas that we have, and certainly supporting our older residents is an essential area. My grandmother died a month ago. My mother had a very difficult time getting help, and frankly put a lot of stress on my mother as well in terms of her own health and ability to care for herself. We have to really think comprehensively on how we're not only increasing the number of providers, but how we're expanding home health care services to not just be 25%, but really to be 50% of the work that we're doing. You know, I don't know why in this country we've lost this culture, the daily practice of making room for the people who have built the foundation before us. And I think it's going to take a collective effort by young and older people to really rebuild that culture back up. And we can do it with, yes, money, with increasing providers, but programmatically, I think the state needs to make a commitment that it is going to expand its community and home-based programs, and it is going to work with multiple departments like Health and Human Services, Department of Health, as well as Department of Education when we talk about health literacy, and bring this really together. Because in the next 10 years, our demographics are going to change significantly. Thank you.
Mr. Brown.
So first on the nursing homes, as I mentioned, the first thing we need to do is ensure that the system doesn't collapse. As I mentioned, a recent report showed that 87% of our nursing homes are at risk of closing. This is a real crisis. This was caused in large part by those Medicaid cuts, so a top priority has got to be restoring and expanding those Medicaid funds and increasing reimbursement rates so we can ensure that our nursing homes have the financial stability they need to transform themselves into places where their residents have safe and dignified care and privacy in the nursing homes. In terms of home care, as I mentioned, we need to increase the pay for direct home care workers, but there's another kind of home care that people receive, which is the care of their loved ones. When I was 21 years old, my mother got cancer. I quit college and moved home to help take care of her. It went into remission, came back a number of years later, and we lost her. I hope and I believe that the fact that I was able to be there in that early stage of caretaking made some kind of difference. Most people in our state aren't able to make the time to care for their loved ones, an aging parent, a sick family member, because we do not have an adequate paid family leave program in this state. Most people just can't do it. So I will, as governor, create a paid family leave program that actually makes it possible to care for their loved ones. 16 weeks of paid family leave and a pro salary so they can afford to do that. Thank you.
Ms. Kalis.
So first we need to start with education. Families and seniors need to be educated in different options in care across the continuum of care so that individuals have an option in terms of the least restrictive setting. We also need to get a hold of the workforce challenges, because if you are on a waiting list for home care, what will happen is as you wait for home care, which is a less restrictive setting of care, if you're waiting too long, you will end up in a nursing home. So we need to address that serious issue. Also, we need to deal with senior housing to make sure there are places that individuals can live independently within the community. And then really what we need to do is expand the federal programs of money follows the patient. There is a study that showed that 1 in 8 individuals in Rhode Island at a veteran's home needed a very low level of medical care. There should be an effort to return those individuals to a less restrictive type of care setting. So there should be an organization that does that. The other thing is we need to reimagine the continuum of care and have it structured more like an accountable care organization in medicine, which means that the different types of care need to be working with each other. So if you go to a hospital, there should be an incentive to immediately discharge you to a nursing home with rehab. And then there should be an incentive to move you to a less restrictive continuum of care, which is home care, and then independent living. So ACOs make sure that there isn't a profit incentive to keep you in one type of care environment versus the other. So we really need to embrace this model and implement it in the state.
Mr. McKee.
Yeah.
Yeah, so rebalancing is front and center. I talked to Jim about that, and we followed through on that as well. So we do have momentum, and the reason that we have momentum is that I manage the largest surplus in the states that I had in the budget, and we're allocating those dollars in a way that's helping across the board, not in silos, but across the board. But $10 million was invested this year to help rebalance As I mentioned before, $900,000 was put in last year to help with actually in-care, in-home care. So it's a community issue, right? And so we, as a former mayor, I'm able to connect in not only with municipal leaders, but also senior directors, and we're going to definitely be doing that and hearing more and more about, because if you're going to have people living at home more longer, then the community centers and senior centers are going to play a significant role in that. Aging Healthy in Rhode Island, Marion Raimondo, we talked to her as well. We put it together and we've been working over the last several weeks to put an executive order in for a master plan on aging, where you're going to bring in all the parties from the states, the local communities, as well as the nonprofits to really speak to that issue. And we'll be putting another executive order in that was Maureen's suggestion too. I do believe we need to be talking to people to get the best ideas, and we will put an executive order in as well to make sure that we instruct every one of our departments to be looking at where revenue may be available for senior efforts for federal and grants and nonprofit grants. So it is a community effort. Rebalancing makes all the sense in the world. I think of my mom. I think many of you have met my mom in the last couple of weeks. And so, yes, my mom does live with us. And we felt as though that was important when she was moving out of the house that she raised her 5 kids in. My dad died in '86, that we would actually be having my mom live with us so that the grandkids and my brothers and sisters can enjoy living with their grandmother, and I enjoy living with my mom and playing cards with her as well.
Ms. Folks.
Yeah, I think it's really critical we think about supply and demand and long-term balancing. This exists in the housing sector too. A lot of places where we have real disconnects in the system need long-term planning. And one of my biggest frustrations as I've watched these sectors and the importance of this in particular is politicians just taking care of the next year. And, you know, small time moves, but not a comprehensive plan. That's what I've done in my career. I've pulled really smart people around me. I've listened to them. We have a long-term plan, and then we create momentum along the way. So specifically, as it relates to ensuring, you know, in the next decade, what's our ideal status of the mix between people living in residential homes versus being in home? What should that look like? What are best practice models around the world? How does Rhode Island become a bright, shining star in the whole country for how we treat our senior citizens? There's so much opportunity in a little state like ours where we could be a role model for this country. A couple specific things I would do to make sure that we're supporting seniors who want to be at home. The hospital discharge system today in this state is a mess, and I've been through it with my own parents. You leave the hospital with a set of pills that are different than were in her medicine cabinet. How do you navigate all that? How do we make that simple for seniors as they go home? How do we make sure we're investing in technology? So when my dad's living alone, if he falls down, we know what happens to him. That should be a right of every senior in this state. How do we make sure that family members who are taking care of our loved ones are compensated accordingly? And how do we just reimagine what the future should look like? Even back in core nursing homes, we should be setting up a system where people can have dignified, single unit living systems with their own rooms, their own bathrooms. The governor had the opportunity to do that this year. He did not do it. I was just talking with a man last night who said, there's nothing like having my own bathroom. And that's such a simple need that we could provide to everyone in this state.
Ms. Corbett.
Look, this is about choices. Everyone deserves to have choices in our lives. That's what we want, not just for ourselves, but for our family members. And we're clearly off the mark here in terms of how we have community-based, the number of community-based options versus nursing homes and how we're spending our dollars. You know, just to give you some data, you know, 41% of the states overall have a balance going over to home care versus nursing homes. In Rhode Island, we're using 26% of our Medicaid dollars on home care versus nursing homes. And there are 10 states actually in the country where they spend 50% or more in community-based partnerships and models. And so that's where we have to go. Now, the state needs to make sure that we're not just providing the resources, but rather that we're providing other resources within those communities. So this is not simply about the Medicaid rebalancing, it's also if we're going to encourage more home-based community programs and staying at home, you have to have housing that's available. Either the zoning needs to be relaxed and there has to be a greater number of housing units where people can live as a multi-generational family, or you have senior adapted housing that allows for them to better live. It also involves having transit options, having the livability in our communities. And so the role of the state goes beyond the dollars and cents and allocating X or Y in programs and buckets, although that's a part of it. It's as a state, how do we ensure that whether you live in Hopkinton or Providence or Central Falls or Westerly or Newport, you have an array of options that allow you to choose at what point you're going to be at home and at what point you're going to need and have to be in a nursing home if that's what's going to be needed.
Thank you. Question 3 is going to be asked by Bob Robillard, President of Rhode Island Senior Center Directors Association. And again, the order of response, Ms. Gorbea, Ms. Kalis, Dr. Munoz, Mr. McKee, Ms. Vokes, and Mr. Brown.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask the question. The Department of Elderly Affairs had 65 staff in the mid-1990s. Currently, the Office of Healthy Aging has a mere 31 staff people. The population for Rhode Island seniors has increased dramatically and will continue to grow exponentially. Funding for senior centers, senior nutrition programs, transportation, information services, and other community supports has not kept pace with the growth in the population, falling further behind in addressing these needs. So the question is, as governor, what will you do to increase resources to significantly support healthy aging in our communities?
Thank you. Thanks to some really wonderful conversations, this is an area that I'm very excited about. I have modernized the Department of State with the existing FTEs and done a lot more than what it was doing before. So the FTE question is not enough. I'm excited to examine with Representative Lauren Carson, who's here and who's a supporter, the possibility of maybe going back to a Department of Elderly Affairs, one that really respects and values the kinds of resources and the integration that we need to have, and I'm committed to seeing that through. But then we have to make sure that we're investing in those staff so that we're doing more with what we have. And technology has helped us improve what we can offer, and it's the integration, it's the value of looking at what's happening in the communities and having the state play a partnership role with nonprofits on the ground. And that's, of everybody on the stage, I'm the one that's actually done that kind of work, both with the municipal level and with nonprofits in the community. And I'm excited about leveraging those resources and partnering from a Department of Elderly Affairs that really values and integrates what we have, not just in the state, but across our municipalities.
Ms. Kalis.
So I would start by doubling the staff. The current staffing is not appropriate for the proportion of the population that is served. So we need to do that. Also, my Lieutenant Governor candidate, Aaron, wants to turn the office into a help center, which is a service center where all needs can go to one place and get addressed, which is a no wrong doors policy, which needs to happen to connect seniors and individuals to all these services because we have a fragmented system right now. I also believe in free transportation for individuals that are over 65, free public transportation, because that is also a path to institutionalization, is not having access to the ability to get to doctor's appointments or other places in the community. There's a fun program, which is the restaurant program that is sort of in the spirit of programs that are helpful. So instead of a Meals on Wheels program delivering just a meal, it's a voucher to go to a restaurant, to be in a community-based setting, to have food and to have company. The other thing that I would do is create a committee of aging in place, where it is an action-based committee that looks at technologies and issues that are presented for aging in place and comes up with solutions to those problems to ensure that individuals can age in place, and that we adopt technologies of the future, and we address any challenges to being able to stay within the community.
Dr. Munoz.
Thank you for the question. You know, I'm going to draw a parallel, and then I'll get to the quick. Thank you. Get to the quick answer. You look at the Department of Health's budget, and full-time staff is about $514, about $65 million worth of salaries. Then you look at service providers, and it's almost double that, right? They've been privatizing our public health systems. And so it seems like there's money, it's not more money for full-time employees that are working on the public sector side, and we need to change that. So we need to increase the number of full-time employees, yes, but what are they going to do? I think it's very important when I look through the lens of being a medical doctor, organizer, to work with health equity zones, to have participatory budgeting, where we are bringing members of the community of the specific demographic together and really talking about what areas of need they've identified, go through assessments, and then make sure that the money is going there to develop the programs, right, or to expand the programs that are essential to them. If we, can we do this? Can we do participatory budgeting? Yes, we can. Acting Secretary Anna Navaisha of the Health and Human Services Department actually teamed with the Department of Health, Dr. Bondi, and they've developed this pilot program to work with two HESs, $900,000 over the next 2 years, on issues of racial inequities and health equity. We can take that pilot as a model and really apply it in this sector as well. So we're not only increasing full-time employees, but those employees have certain roles and duties that will point them towards our health equity zones around the state and really bring communities together to ensure that we are developing and expanding the programs that are essential to you. Because again, times are changing, and we continue to operate behind this table and talk about solutions, but if we're not including communities in those solutions, I don't really think we're going to be able to implement them effectively. Thank you.
Mr. McKee.
Yes, so we are going to elevate that position to a cabinet level position. That's what our proposal will be next year. I think that it was a good try to kind of put it under an umbrella in a way that the secretary was overseeing each one of these departments. But I think that we've got to take a real close look, not only in that area, but also in our Veterans Affairs as well. They should be elevated to cabinet positions. And we have been working to do just that, so we're including those department heads in our discussion. So an evaluation in terms of the workforce is certainly important. I also think it's the local communities that also need to be connected in even stronger than they are right now in terms of their senior centers. The Meals on Wheels, we did increase the funding this year, and the Medicaid reimbursement for the Meals on Wheels. There are a number of things, like I just are going over a litany of things that we have done. The 2030 plan has seniors mentioned in there, but we have a draft that's going to be a specific entry into the Rhode Island 2030 plan for on the senior issues. This is one of the areas that we certainly evaluated and made recommendations on to strengthen that office. We have done some things in terms of activating the point, in terms of the services, putting all the services that are available to seniors. Maureen was very instrumental in making that happen. So there are things that have been done. We've got more work to do, just like we have in every community in the state of Rhode Island. The seniors are no exception. I think that office can be a lot more connected in publicly, as opposed to just being a director under a secretary, and that's the plan. We're going to elevate that up. We're going to ask the General Assembly to do that, and then we'll take a look at the staffing at that point in time to see what we need to do to continue to get the most value for the seniors that we can possibly have. But connecting in with our local communities is also something that I think is absent at the moment to the degree that it needs to be done.
Ms. Folks?
Well, investing in making sure that community care is as good as it can be is critical for every Rhode Islander. And I think the way I've always produced results in my life is to have incredibly talented people working around me and holding ourselves accountable for results. That's ultimately how you make things happen. I remember early on, I asked someone for the current org structure of for the governor and what did that look like, and it came back and I thought, this looks like a phone book listing to me. This doesn't look like an organization chart where you have a handful of people you really know you can lean on. And so what I would be doing is making sure we have the best talent serving every sector, but particularly, obviously, elderly, and holding that team accountable, making sure we have a master plan on aging. You know, we can't just get away with every year ticking and talking a few simple things. A master plan would really allow us to think about what should Medicaid be paying for? What are new models happening across the country? We can look at California, for example, where Medicaid is actively engaged in social services for seniors. We should be looking at Medicaid and the role of reimbursement for home care. And this master plan should allow us to take care of both the statewide resources, the local resources, put them all together, include things like housing, transportation. All of these elements lead to great health care and lives for our senior citizens. And that's the kind of leadership I would love to bring, because ultimately, I can't think of anything better than leading a state where we're so proud to be having people feel that this is a state where they can age very comfortably and feel safe and secure and dignified in their lives.
Mr. Brown.
So as I mentioned earlier, poverty rates for seniors in Rhode Island have increased over the last 10 years. That is outrageous. It's unacceptable. And I believe, watch out, Steve. Yeah, thank you. All right, that worked. I believe that the core of the problem is that the people who've been running things have the wrong priorities. They're not working for seniors. They're not working for working people. They're not working for people who are vulnerable. They're working for the very richest people in our state and very large corporations, the people who fund their campaigns. They gave a massive tax cut to the richest 1%. That's just people making $450,000 or more. That tax cut alone cost our state $1 billion, while most people are struggling, including our seniors. So we need to reprioritize. We need to prioritize the well-being of our seniors, the ability of our seniors to live and age in their communities the way they want to. That needs to be a priority. And that means investing in social workers, investing in outreach workers, investing in senior centers that are going to reach out to our seniors and make sure they have the resources and the care that they need. And yes, it means increasing the funding in the Department of Elderly Affairs and increasing the staffing so they can reach out to seniors and make sure they have the resources and the care that they need. Thank you.
Question 4. This will be a yes or a no question from the response from the candidates. We have Wiona Nelson Davies, the Executive Director of the Economic Progress Institute.
Thank you. Good morning. I have a two-part question focused on the immediate ways for the state to impact the incomes of lower-income seniors, the SSI and MSP programs. The Supplemental Security Program is a federal program that provides monthly payments to seniors age 65 and older and people with disabilities who have limited income and resources. The state provides a supplement, but the total benefit of SSI plus the state supplement in 2022 is $880.92, which is only 78% of the federal poverty level. While the federal portion is adjusted every year, the state share has been frozen for 30+ years. For lower-income Medicare enrollees, average out-of-pocket healthcare costs at $6,668 yearly are a significant economic burden for those who are not eligible for Medicaid. The Medicare Savings Program, a joint federal and state program, pays some Medicare-related costs. States are allowed to increase the eligibility limits. While our neighboring states have expanded financial eligibility for MSP, Rhode Island continues to use the federal minimum income and asset eligibility criteria. Here are the questions. As governor, will you, 1, increase a yearly cost of living adjustment to the state SSI supplement payment in your 2024 proposed budget? And 2, will you increase eligibility for the Medicare Savings Program for seniors and people with disabilities in your proposed 2024 budget by eliminating the asset test and increasing eligibility to at least 185% of the federal poverty level?
Again, a yes or no answer for both parts. Ms. Folks?
Yes.
Mr. McKee?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Gorbea? Yes. Dr. Munoz?
Yes.
Ms. Kalis?
Yes, but I would modify the asset test, not completely eliminate it. But yes, yes.
Question 5 by Joan Kowalski, CEO of PACE Organization of Rhode Island. And again, the order will be Mr. McKee, Ms. Folks, Ms. Kalis, Mr. Brown, Ms. Munoz, Ms. Gorbea.
So you've all spoken to affordable housing, which is the basis for this question. The need for safe and affordable housing for older Rhode Islanders has been well documented and is critical to maintaining their health, well-being, and independence. Now that the state has passed an unprecedented $250 million in funding for housing, as governor, how will you ensure that an adequate amount is allocated to support our older population? Thank you.
Mr. McKee.
So, yes, the answer is yes. There's going to be senior housing. I did that as a mayor in Cumberland, and I'll do it as a governor as well. We've already announced some expansions, actually in my hometown, Bear Hill Village, West House project in Middletown. We announced, I think, 825 units where there were elderly units, about $80 million investments in 17 communities in the state. So we're off and running on this issue. The $250 million, we're going to leverage that into about $1 billion worth of housing. And we're going to do that in a way that we're going to run the gamut from housing for the, for sheltering, housing for people who are homeless, right on through age groups, right on through income levels. That is in process as well. And it's part of the 2030 plan, and right in there specifically in the Rhode Island 2030 plan, it speaks specifically to senior housing. So we'll have good people that are going to work on that. We're going to get, real good value. And we also have, I want to also mention that we had funds this year from federal, thank God for our congressional leadership, $200 million worth of housing, rental assistance, utility assistance. That was not going really well at first when I showed up. But we're going to have that full $200 million allocated. I think it came up in one of our debates that we weren't getting all that out. I think we're the only state in the country that's doing that. And focusing in those areas, in particular into the seniors in the housing, to make sure they're not addicted, make sure that they are, they're receiving the resources that are available. This $250 million is a record, historic type of investment in housing. And again, we have momentum. We're going to take care. We're going to build on this momentum, and we're going to share that momentum out in the housing area, with including the senior issues.
Ms. Folks.
Yeah, I think there are just so many places where the government could work better and make sure that people are accessing the funds they need, and this is a really important one. For example, we got $200 million from the federal government in the last year and a half to make sure people were not evicted from their homes. And over a year later, half of that money was still stuck in a pot of money and not being allocated because, as I talked to faith and community leaders, their people didn't know how to get access to this money. So a big part of being a leader is making sure that we're getting the funds we have to the people who need it, in particular, in this case, obviously, seniors. I'd also be a big proponent of making sure that we're using this money to think about smart design of housing. How do we help seniors age in place? What are best practices around the country? And then I've also advocated for accessory dwelling units, just as Massachusetts and California have this. We could allow our seniors who are living in homes and let's say they have a garage in the back and they can convert that to an apartment where they could live more simply and then be able to rent out their home. That's a very simple idea that allows people to age with real grace and increase our housing supply, and it doesn't take a long period of time to do things like that. So those are the kinds of ideas that I'd love to bring to make sure that we're really investing in housing and our seniors can live with great dignity.
Ms. Kalis.
So of the $250 million, I would commit to earmarking, can't hear me, I'm sorry. I would commit to earmarking 15% for senior affordable housing that's in proportion to the population. And what we would do is create a pool of money for developers to use to create housing across housing continuum, just traditional sort of senior housing or within complexes, but then also if you get anything from today from me, if you look into the Greenhouse Project, it is really a great model of housing. It is small housing units, 10 to 12 individuals that live together within a community with a caretaker as the center of that, within the larger community as well. It costs less money, it delivers better care, it is a better way to do housing within the community rather than institutionalized care, and it is something that we should encourage, it is something that we should look into. I don't even do it justice when I describe it. It is such a beautiful model that is respectful of elders, and it is a sort of model and sort of community environment that I want for my children. I want my children to have interactions with elders in the community, and it is a way to be respectful and value those individuals. I will also say that leadership matters. With me, you will get somebody who is not beholden to anyone, to any special interest, and I will make sure that that money is spent appropriately and wisely without any other interest other than getting the most value out of the dollars that we have.
Mr. Brown.
So we have an affordable housing crisis in the state for seniors and for all Rhode Islanders. The rents in the Providence area have gone up 24% just over the last 2 years during the pandemic. And the cost of owning a home has also skyrocketed. So it is a crisis. Instead of treating this like the crisis that it is, Governor McKee has given massive tax breaks to luxury developers while people are struggling to meet their basic needs. Just recently announced that his administration is going to give tens of millions of dollars of our money to build a soccer stadium while people are struggling just to get by. And once again, we see that those developers and their lobbyists are major donors to Governor McKee's campaign. We need to end this corruption and focus on meeting the basic needs of our seniors and the people in this state. Our plan is to build tens of thousands of truly affordable homes for all Rhode Islanders, including seniors. No one in this program will pay more than 20% of their income for their home. And we will cap annual rent increases at 4% so that everybody in the state can afford to put a roof over their heads and over their families' heads. Thank you.
Dr. Munoz.
Yeah, thanks. I agree that rent stabilization statewide policy around that would be very important and good. I think it's important to acknowledge that $250 million is not enough. That should just be the start. We have to also acknowledge that we have, different cities and towns with different dynamics. The Narragansett Indian tribe built out elderly housing in the early 2000s, and the town of Charlestown killed permitting, and those houses were then vandalized. Elderly housing, no one spoke up. We had the rent relief program, and I've been very vocal about my concerns about Rhode Island housing and its management, outsourcing work to a Utah call center that had protocols in place where if you didn't respond after a certain number of emails, you were rejected. No discussions around accessibility or tech literacy or all of these important issues that relate to age as well. So as governor, it is important, and it certainly will be my point, to ensure that the organizations that we're working with are taking all of this into account, or we will not work with them any longer. We continue to work with intermediaries that talk about equity but don't do the work that they need to do. And I mean that. Delia Rodriguez from Providence's school district ran community-based clinics for some of those rent relief applications. Representative Leonella Felix was running clinics. Direct Action for Rights and Equality were running clinics. I was there, but I have to give credit to these organizations, the mutual aid organizations that are doing the work and not even getting paid for it, versus the organizations getting 6 figures of salaries for multiple people and then getting all the glory. And that's what continues to happen in Rhode Island. And it is not right, it is unjust, and that is not how we move forward. We do need to redo our zoning laws. We need to work with different cities and towns. We need to tackle the hard truth of this history of classism that continues to divide us and talk about mixed housing. How do we bring elderly housing together in the sphere of low income and affordable housing, and even subsidized housing? Unless people can live together and come to grips with the fact that you can be poor and you can live a life of dignity and you can live beside those who are wealthier, like nothing's going to change. So my commitment at Governor is to put the money where it needs to go, but also to have the hard conversations that we need to have. Thank you.
Ms. Corbett.
So of everybody here, housing, of course, is one of my main issues. In fact, I have made it the #1 issue of my gubernatorial candidacy, and I'm proud to do it based on all of the years that I've worked with any of you in the community on housing issues when I was Executive Director of Housing Works Rhode Island. I've served on the Building Homes Rhode Island Committee. I know how to move monies that we allocate. It's great that we're investing, finally, in a more affordable housing. That's something I advocated for 15 years ago. But it's how does that money get used on the ground? And I know how to get that out into the communities and making sure that, yes, we're building senior housing, family housing, adaptive housing, supportive housing. Money is not enough, though. So these kinds of issues are interconnected, and so you have to make sure that you're building the senior housing at a place where there's transit available, that there are other services available that people might need. And for me, as someone who has grappled with these issues over 30 years as a community leader and in community problem solving, I know how to get that done. And it's working with each and every one of you out in the community and making sure that the decisions that we're making are not just siloed into, oh yeah, we're going to build X number of units of housing. But where are those housing units being built? How are they adding to the mix that's already there? And what other services are being leveraged as you locate that housing? I'm excited about working on this with each and every one of you. You've seen me do this as your Secretary of State. I came into that office knowing what to do and how to get things done. And I come into this candidacy for governor knowing how to move things forward.
Question 6. Jim Vincent, President of NAACP Province, will ask the question. The order of response will be Mr. Brown, Ms. Brooks, Ms. Kalis, Ms. Corbea, Mr. McKee, Dr. Munoz.
COVID disproportionately impacted Black and Brown communities, with particular devastation on our Black and Brown elders and Black and Brown healthcare workers and persons with disability. The 2020 Healthy Aging Data Report tells us that there are more than 50 health indicators that have evident disparities in the Black and Brown senior population, including diabetes, congestive heart failure, stroke, and Alzheimer's disease. There is a lack of access to high-quality health care and lack of information about available resources that support aging independently for our older Black and Brown Rhode Islanders. The lack of data from our state agencies on who they serve and where those services are being provided inhibits the state's ability to make improvements in access and delivery of care. The question, as governor, will you commit to doing better for the Black and Brown communities by ensuring every state agency collects and analyzes data on race, ethnicity, and languages spoken for the people they serve within your first 2 years in office? Make this data available to the public and make improvements as needed in the second half of your term to ensure equal access to high-quality health care and information about available resources.
Mr. Brown.
Yeah, yes, I will do that. It's something we should have been doing for a long, long time. But having said that, we can't wait 2 years to begin addressing the racial disparities that we know exist. We don't need to wait on the data for that. We need to get the data. We need to improve the collection and analysis of the data, and we'll do that. But we also need to start moving forward on closing these racial disparities. 2 things that we will do that I think are critically important to begin that. One is to restore the Medicaid funds. And I say that because Black and brown seniors are disproportionately reliant on Medicaid in this state. So those cruel and immoral cuts to Medicaid that the people running things in this state made, even over the objections of people like me and many others who said that it was going to hurt a lot of people, those cuts need to be undone. We need to restore those Medicaid funds, and that is one of the most important things we can do to close racial health disparities in this state. Secondly, the health disparities caused in this state by the fact that the people in power have allowed industrial polluting industries to line themselves up in our largely Black and brown communities are outrageous. So we have in the Port of Providence polluting industries that have been there for decades, that the community has been fighting to close, that are poisoning the people, the families, the children in those neighborhoods of South Providence and Washington Park. If you drive down Allen's Ave with the window down, you will feel it in your lungs. The children and the families there are choking on it every day. And it's not a coincidence that that's where they are. I believe if those polluting industries had been put in a different neighborhood, a wealthy neighborhood, they would have been shut down a long time ago.
Ms. Folks.
Yes, and I'd like to move faster than that, Jim. I think, the COVID highlighted a problem we already had. The racial disparities in this state and this country have been sadly here for a long time, and COVID just put a bright light on them. But if you think about things like diabetes, asthma, the representation in Black and brown communities is significantly higher than the general population. So I have 3 ideas that I would be pursuing around this. One is engaging our faith and community leaders much more aggressively. They're on the ground, they see it. During COVID, they knew that the initial approach on testing and our COVID response was not working in their communities, but they were not heard, so we need to pull them into this process. Number 2, part of my education plan, I have proposed turning many of our schools into community centers where seniors and others could access healthcare needs. Look at this building, it's spectacular. We have schools all across this state which are very close to seniors and other people. They could come get access to healthcare, they could get access to services, understand the benefits that are available to them. So being closer to the community and bringing this care to them is something I've done my whole career in healthcare, and I think the state government sorely needs that. And then my 3rd idea is to expand the Rhode Island Promise program for nursing. We have a shortage of Black and brown nurses in this state too, and so as our nurses are interfacing with their patients, there's a big disconnect. Language obviously, but even just skin color. So my idea in Rhode Island Promise is that if you go for 4 years of school in state to become a nurse, and you agree to serve for 4 years afterwards as a nurse, we pay your tuition. It would dramatically increase our supply of nurses. They'd be more diverse, and that'd be a big part of helping on this equation as well.
Ms. Kalis.
Yes, so I would move to that, and I would make sure that that happens. It doesn't take 2 years. It should happen much faster than that. I ran healthcare organizations, and part of it was quality assurance, and you always looked at the communities in which you served and then looked to make sure to see if there were disparities, and when there were disparities, you corrected them. So if I can do it in a smaller organization, we should have already done that in this state. And I will tell you that my impression in interacting with the state on contracts is that the state doesn't really care. What I saw, and I can spend 2 hours talking about this, was a state where I had to force my EEOC reports, which show the diversity of my organization, to leadership. And I was really proud of it. We had a majority minority organization, and not just through workers, through leadership as well. And there was no request for those reports, and there wasn't really much interest when it was something that I felt that we reflected my own values. So that's one thing. And I also want to talk about how government is, under me, you will see a different, more open, responsible, and responsive government. What you will see is truly open meetings. I believe that citizens should have access to meetings, which means that you should be able, in open meetings, have access to them online. And in my administration, you will see that. I believe it is important for democracy. The other thing is I will stop the games with freedom of information requests. And so if people want information about the workings of their government, I will not have lawyers prevent folks from getting information on their government by using technicalities and delays. What you will see in a Kalus administration is a truly open and transparent government that does what it says it's going to do and actually acts and lives in the values that it says that it has. And one of mine is diversity and health equity, and I deeply, deeply believe that.
Ms. Gorbea.
Well, again, of all the people here on the stage, we can all talk about fairness and equity all you want, but I've been working it for 30 years. Since I moved to this state, since I got involved in the community, I have been an active community leader on diversity, on equity, and access. And I'm excited about being able to do that from the governor's chair. The issues that we're talking about in terms of data collection, sure, we can collect data. You can go to the Department of State website, sos.ri.gov, and you'll see that we've added all sorts of new data collection. It's not just about collecting the data, it's how do you present it in a way that's understandable to the public, because we have all seen data websites that are like Greek, and I say that as somebody who loves public policy. So it's also about how you communicate that data to regular folks so that they can engage with their government and hold it accountable. And it's about how we then use that data within government to make the changes that we have to. Now, the data's not enough. You need to have community partners. And again, as somebody who knows many of you in the audience, I know where to reach you. I know how to engage you. And I've engaged you in a number of things. Voting, for example, in elections. Because we have to make sure that our government is accountable and is engaged with the people it's supposed to serve. So I don't need a roadmap on these issues. I need to be able to have the chair and then be able to work with each and every one of you to address the health inequities in this state.
Mr. McKee.
This issue has been a high priority in my life, not just as governor, but it has been a high priority, and it's reflected in my administration. So I go to Jim Vincent, give me some recommendations. Our staff reflects those recommendations. Our judicial system is beginning to reflect those recommendations. So when you talk about actually action and doing the work, we're doing that. And let's not kid ourselves. We didn't get here overnight. And I've known for years, and I've done something about in education, the level playing fields for the black and brown communities and the poor communities in this state. And I've done that over the last 15 years. No one else on the stage has entered into education the way that I have, and we're going to make that a priority, and that's why we're investing in the way they are right now. $47 million was put in my budget this year for community centers. East Providence is going to have one. Working with the mayor right now and 34 other different proposals inside of those dollars, which is going to impact the seniors and people of color and people throughout the state of Rhode Island. You have to do three things in that to qualify. One, you have to work on health issues. Two, you have to work on education issues. And three, you have to work on jobs issues. And let's not forget the importance of jobs. If we have momentum in the state of Rhode Island, because we have the lowest unemployment in the history of the state of Rhode Island, and we still have good paying jobs available, the way that we're going to provide services is by having a good economy. And jobs are important in that. So for us to provide services and to really get down deep into the areas that I want to get into, we reconstructed the whole diversity office. We are now following the 10% rule in terms of minority and women-owned businesses. This has happened over like 15 months. What can you expect from me over 4 years? This is going to be, we're having tremendous progress in this area amongst all other areas, and top priority is increase people's incomes in any way that we can.
Dr. Munoz.
Mr. Vincent, you and I serve on the state's Equity Council, and I think we can both agree that this for-profit healthcare system wasn't designed to support communities of color. It was designed to support the elites, those that were deemed to be more human than others, and it's been perpetuated. And the reason I say that is, why is it that we have all the data we need and we continue to see the disparities? We continue to see inequities. We continue to see poor health outcomes for women of color. And when COVID-19 happened, we saw a testing system roll out that required a physician referral. You know how many people didn't have a physician to refer them? Even neighborhood health plan was rejecting people because they didn't have a plastic membership card for a while. And then we had the vaccination rollout, and the governor knows I was concerned with the inequities that continue to exist today. And community members, over 100 members and organizations came together, and yes, with the resources that the state provided, but still community-driven, created on-site registration support for people. And you know how many languages we had ready? 20. You know how many languages they gave us at first? Spanish and English. That is the problem. We continue to have reactive administrations that do the bare minimum until we call them out, and we need things to change. We want to assess homelessness, then let's start talking about how the federal government doesn't count you as homeless if you live on families' couches. You know how many people of color live on their families' couches? Let's talk about education equity zones to assess the fact that we continue to have widening inequities in our education systems, and our education funding formula is inadequate. Let's start talking about environmental justice zones where we're actually going through assessments, continuous assessments, not one DEM, DOH assessment every 2 years, every single year to measure air pollutants and to figure out how we're going to support the communities that we have marginalized for years. Let's do the work, but let's actually do the work. Let's go on the ground and work with communities to implement these changes, because it's not going to be easy. It's not enough that we continue to say, like, I care about equity. We had a hospital merger. Who stood against it? I did. We had a waiving of the contract requirements for minority and women-owned businesses in the Remuneration administration, and who was in office that stood against that? No one on this stage stood up when those were waived.
We'll move on to question 7, to be posed by Maureen Regret, Chair of Aging in the Community Subcommittee of the Long-Term Coordinating Council. The order of response will be back to you, Dr. Munoz, Mr. Brown, Ms. Folks, Ms. Kalis, Ms. Gorbea, and Mr. McKee.
Good morning, candidates and audience here, and I think several hundred watching from their homes. My question is, state aging and long-term care services are fragmented, spread across a number of state agencies, lack stable leadership, and a coherent and overarching vision. Development of a cross-sectional strategic plan on aging will help the state look at its infrastructure and coordination of services for its rapidly growing older population. Such a plan will look at the domains for community livability, such as transportation, housing, information services, food and economic security, access to health care, supports for living at home, and caregiver supports and public spaces. It will identify service gaps and waiting lists and racial inequities in the accessibility and delivery of services for immigrants and communities of color. It will use data to project long-term services and support needs, and it will bring together state agencies, members of the legislature, community organizations, direct care staff, older persons and persons with disabilities, faith and business leaders, and academia together to set a vision, goals, and action steps. The question, as governor, will you pledge to address the needs of our growing older population and provide the leadership and resources necessary to create and implement a Rhode Island strategic plan on aging? Thank you.
Dr. Munoz.
Yeah, yes, I will, and I think it is important to bring all the departments together. When we talk about transportation, well, I think many of us can agree on where mass transit should go. I do think we should have intramunicipal trolley systems. I mean, I think it should be very easy for someone to jump on a trolley and get from one side of town to the other. I think we should use that as a model and expand. Accessibility is everything. You can lay out all of the resources, but for many people, it's not in walking distance. If they don't have a car, then they're not going to go there. We have, we're facing this pandemic, right? That you can call it an endemic, but, monkeypox around the corner. People that have chronic diseases should not be solely reliant on being pushed into crowded buses to go from one location to the other. So we need to, again, really rethink our transportation system and ensure that accessibility is accounted for and public health. We should certainly talk about housing, right? And we should be working with Health and Human Services to consider, some of the implications around not just whether people have a roof over their head, but where they have a roof over their head and their proximity to nutritional resources. Because we may not have the food deserts in, relative to Bronx, New York, in terms of New York City, but we certainly have areas, especially in South Providence, where a 71-year-old person, is probably going to walk to a grocery store that has limited options. And I'm bringing up all these points to say it needs to be a comprehensive approach. We need to use our Department of Education for literacy materials to account for the language needs and to ensure that we're not just restricting the work being done to a couple of languages because it's politically correct. And we need to also work with our Department of Health, our Department of Health and Human Services, and even our Department of Commerce, and thinking about what types of businesses we're bringing here and what resources are they going to provide our local economies and the people that they're serving, which is all of us. So, thank you.
Mr. Brown.
And sorry, one question. Did you say we're doing closing statements or not?
Yes.
We are, okay. So I will say very briefly, because I think the question outlined it really well. Yes, I would approach this in a comprehensive way, create a strategic plan on aging across departments. And the reason is, I think it's been clear from the discussion here today that there are a whole host of issues that are contributing to struggles for seniors to get by, and those issues are interrelated. Housing, income, health issues, racial disparities, transportation challenges. And so it only makes sense to approach those in a comprehensive way across departments in our administration and to develop for the state a strategic plan on aging. So I would do that. Thank you.
Ms. Folks.
Yes, absolutely. We do need a strategic plan. And I think this connects to the fact that I've led at large scale and produced results my whole life. It's the only reason I'm in this race is I really want to make a difference for people. In my career, my last role at CVS, I was there 25 years, but at my last role, I led 200,000 people. I had responsibility for an $80 billion budget. And I know it's different than big government, but I think it's so relevant because what that was all about was having great people, a good plan, producing results in the short term, and having a long-term strategy where we could really serve our customers. I think the people of Rhode Island deserve the same. I would love to do that for a strategic plan on aging because there are so many great minds in this room, listening around the state, who we could pull together and not just have a long-term plan, which we need. One of the ways I got change to happen in my career and really busting a bureaucracy that I worked in was to create short-term wins and momentum along the way. We need that as it relates to aging as well. So with all of this expertise, how do we aim for transformational change around aging so Rhode Island is a bright shining star? But what could we do in the first 100 days? What would be the things that we know we could do that people would say, wow, we can really get our act together and make a difference. So I look forward to engaging all of you, and I really believe we could make a big difference.
Ms. Kalis.
So yes, I believe in a whole of government approach, and we'll have the plan available within 120 days. If you don't have deadlines, then you don't actually achieve anything. So what you'll see in my administration is that I'm a problem solver, so I believe in standards, metrics, benchmarks, and also deadlines, because the only way to get things done is to set a deadline, which is a benchmark. So either it's early, on time, or late. So we will deliver the plan. And then instead of, we'll publish the 400-page report, which you always get with one of these plans, but also put it on a website where you can clearly see the standards and benchmarks that we're looking for and our progress towards those. That is the only way to hold government accountable, and I invite people to hold me accountable as governor. If you have a track record of success and you believe you can get it done, you have no issue with accountability, and that is what you will see in my administration. Now, that is a long-term plan, and it'll take a while for us to get to some of our goals. So in the short term, we do need to have a service center to deal with the fact that services are fragmented. So that will be a short-term bill for the long-term plan, but we will deliver a plan in my administration, and then there will be accountability built into the process.
Ms. Corbett.
You know, the fact that we're even having this question on the table is, I think, a real indictment of our current governor's work as lieutenant governor, because it is one of the few responsibilities that a lieutenant governor has is the Long Care Council. So I would say that, you know, as governor, I would absolutely, within the first 6 months, have strategic plans in place that would be informed not just by data, but also by community partners. I think that's really, really important. And you've seen it in my work. You know, you don't get to the kind of elections that we had and how seamlessly it went in 2020 without a strategic plan, community partners, and really good communication. You get to it by having done the work every single year in terms of changing laws, not the ones that you get bill signings out of, but the ones that are in the weeds, to change the way government works through a number of measures. And then so that when you have a crisis, like an election during a pandemic at a time when, you know, all sorts of things are breaking loose, you have clearly set up processes that are informed by the community, that the community is engaged in, and you have a record turnout, and everybody walks away feeling that they have been able to vote safely and securely. That is leadership in government, and that is what I'm hoping to bring to this field as well.
Mr. McKee.
Well, first, I'll say that I worked with some really good people when I was lieutenant governor on that long-term health care. Many of them are in this room, and I'm proud of the fact that we were able to work on major issues that were important. One that comes to mind is the Alzheimer's issue, which I inherited. We have the first state-approved Alzheimer's plans in the state of Rhode Island, and that happened with the leadership that I was able to work with on that long-term health care, including my office and myself, and that making us eligible for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Light ships, you know, light distances away from other states in terms of that work. So, and the answer is yes. The Rhode Island 2030 plan is going to be a comprehensive plan for the entire state of Rhode Island. It's not going to put us in silos. It's going to work on each area that's of importance, and many of those areas we'll talk to today. I have talked about the fact earlier in this session that I'll be putting out an executive order for a master plan on aging to continue the work that we know is already in progress, as well as an executive order to instruct all our departments to be taking a look at any revenue sources that may be available, revenue streams in those respective offices that could bring back help to the senior community. So, yes, the answer is yes. I'll certainly hold my closing comments, but a couple of corrections. One, we did get the $200 million out. We'll get every dollar out. Number one in the country on that rental assistance program, by the way. So if you keep on hearing that somehow 50% went out, no, 100% of those dollars were retained in the state of Rhode Island. And that was under my leadership as well, because I made sure a slow start. We finished very strong. We kept those dollars in place. So yes, the answer is yes. I'll have an executive order, and we've been working on that for a period of time. And also the 2030 plan will have a specific area on senior issues, and then under that there'll be a subset on specific that specific plan that Maureen was talking about.
To meet our time plan, we have 6 minutes left to ask the candidates for a brief closing statement, and we'll start with Ms. Corbett.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you here. Thank you for coming and being engaged in our elections. You know, of the people here on the stage, you all know me. You've known me because for 30 years I've worked with many of you out in the community on community problem solving, whether it's in the Black and brown community or the Asian community. I am absolutely committed to making sure that Rhode Islanders, whether they're seniors or they're infants, have the best state, the best resources available to them. We can do this in a state our size. And I've done it through the Department of State in many, many different ways. And I've loved that work. And I look forward to being your next governor because I know I can count on all of you to help me lead the state in a way that's respectful, not just to seniors, but to all Rhode Islanders. Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Things have just gotten harder and harder for people in our state. Most people, everyone except the very rich, are struggling or outright suffering if they fall through the cracks. And the reason is that the cost of the basic things people need, like housing and healthcare, have gone up hundreds of %. And wages have stayed essentially the same, which means people can't get by. It doesn't add up. They can't take care of themselves and their families. And the reason is that the people in power are not working for the people. They're not working for us. They're working for the very rich, and they're working for large corporations and their lobbyists. And it's been that way a long time, and we all know it. So we need a change. And I've spent my life running nonprofit organizations, working to solve some tough problems in our communities. And I can tell you that for those of us who do the work in the community, we know that no one person can bring the change we need. That's not how it happens. Which is why I'm not running for governor alone. I'm running with the great state senator Cynthia Mendes from this community as lieutenant governor, and dozens of extraordinary people from across the state running together on a shared platform. So together we can form a new government and address the needs of our people. Thank you.
Mr. McKee?
So, when leadership mattered the most, I responded as a leader. We have never seen an emergency like we saw when I became governor. What has been the response? We are #1 in vaccinations. We were one of the lowest. We have the lowest unemployment in the state's history. We have the fastest recovering economy in the Northeast. We have the second fastest recovering economy in the country. The seniors are going to benefit from that. The tax circuit breaker was expanded. Increased Medicaid in terms of Meals on Wheels. $900,000 for in-home health care. $10 million in rebalance. The progress is started. Don't miss out on this opportunity. I'm asking for your support. The plan is in process. We are working with the right people to get this done, and the seniors are going to benefit from that. Thank you.
Dr. Munoz?
The dogmas of the distant past are inadequate to the stormy present. You know, Abe Lincoln once said that, and the fact is things need to change. They're not going to change by having the same people in office. You know, we could see a little bit done here and there, but unless we're really able to lean into the challenges put forth today, the inequities that continue to exist, the money will not end up in the places that we've discussed. It just won't. But there's two types of healing in healthcare. You got the primary healing where you close it up. Most of the time, you try to stitch it up. And every so often, when that wound is dirty, it just opens right back up. And that's what we have every 4 years. Wounds just bursting out because administrations fail to lean into the hard truths. They fail to acknowledge that cronyism, that corruption, that special interests dominate Rhode Island politics. And you can see it if you follow the money. And I may be the least funded candidate, but I am the right candidate running for the right office at the right time in history. Healthcare is the primary issue, and everything else is just a contributor to it. I'm running for governor to make sure things change for the better. Thank you.
Ms. Davis?
So I often say that how good a society is or how just it is how you treat your most vulnerable citizens. And the reality is that we have a lot of work to do. And in Rhode Island, we have big problems, but we are a small state, and there is nothing structural about our problems. This is a decision. And if we have the political will, then we will have the ability to make big changes that'll impact everybody in this state and make this state a more affordable place to live, work, and raise a family, and make it more of a just state. But you need an outsider, somebody who is not beholden, somebody who is not part of the same system that has failed children and seniors and vulnerable communities for decades now. I am different. I answer questions directly with a policy solution that you can hold me accountable to, and I do not pivot to talking points in any of my answers. That is something that is unique, and that is something that is not like a politician. When I am governor, you will see someone who speaks directly and does what they say they are going to do, and I believe that Rhode Island deserves that, and if we are going to have transformational change in the state, we need a different sort of leader.
Ms. Folks?
Well, thank you so much for being here and having me. I talk to Rhode Islanders every day who feel so worried about what's going on. You know, despite what the governor says, people don't feel secure. They see a recession coming. They're being squeezed out of their homes, the gas pumps, and it's everywhere. I remember talking to my aunt who lives in an assisted living facility, and she said, you know, my costs are going up so much and my income is fixed. These are the people that all of you are serving, that I would like to serve, and I think it requires real leadership to make change. And the example that I would give you that I'm most proud of in my career was the decision I led to get us out of cigarettes in 2014. I was at CBS, it was a $2 billion business, and we knew cigarettes killed 480,000 people every year in this country. So we came together as a team, we made a really hard decision to walk away, and it unleashed in the organization a real spirit of creativity and a sense of purpose, and I'd love to do that for the people of Rhode Island, so thank you.
This concludes our forum. Let's show our appreciation to all the candidates with a rousing round of applause. Thank you all. Thanks for coming. It's a pleasure.
Well, everybody, you've got to see what has happened here today with all of the governor's candidate, your candidate for governors. I hope that if you missed any part of it, that you rewind and watch it again. It's really important that you hit the like button and the share button, because it's important that every voter here in Rhode Island who is either an older adult, is caring for an older adult, or hopes one day to be an older adult, gets the information that was shared here today by the candidates. Super important. I'm really glad that you were able to join us today and watch this live stream. Please help us get the word out. I'm Deb Burton, the Executive Director of RI Elder Info and creator of rielderinfo.com. I look forward to seeing you all this Friday at 9 a.m. for our Friday Friends live stream. In the meantime, be well and be kind.